Welcome to the Retro Adventure. So this is a podcast about classic text adventure games and making sure that your spaceship has enough fuel. I'm your host, Jason Compton. We are joined this episode around by a new player. You may know him from the YouTube scene as Dudley of Yesterzine, who has a format not unfamiliar to those of you who may have listened to some of our magazine episodes. But Dudley, if you'd give us a little bit of a tour of what you do in the realm of retro computing and gaming before we delve into our games this week.
Yeah, primarily you find me on the channel Yesterzine, i.e. Yesterday and Magazine, where every month I'm looking at usually British computing or games magazine and going through it, sometimes to talk about the magazine, but sometimes just as an excuse to pick up on some of the content of that magazine and look into it. So as a show, you might get games reviews, you might get magazine history, you might get machine retrospectives, depending on what is interesting in that magazine.
Do you have a particular, I mean, you said British, but do you have a particular era or machine of focus, or are you pretty multi-format?
It's been pretty wide. The earliest magazine is 84, 85. The latest one was 2011. I refer to it as the golden age. That's basically the point where machines actually could have magazines. Myself, I gravitate to the 16 bits, but I played everything over the years. I'm sufficiently old.
I was going to say, that's around when Micro Adventurer magazine is shutting down, because they were 83 into 84. Does that mean you haven't touched on one of those yet?
I haven't. I don't think I've tried to do a text-based adventure on the show, because visual medium, and it's a little bit trickier. The oldest magazines were all early ZX Spectrum ones.
Yeah, well, some of these games are more visual than others, as we will discuss when we get to a particularly graphical and in some cases blinding example of the genre. But thank you so much for joining us. It is just the two of us this time around, but we appreciate Dudley setting aside the time. And we're going to head into our appetizer game, Steve Silver Adventure number 1. So this is a little bit of an unusual selection here on the Retro Adventurers, because typically at least one of the hosts who has selected the game is on the episode. But the backstory of this episode, of this game being selected, I believe this was a Dave Hawkins submission, and this was submitted very early on. Dave is still participating in conversations with us. He just hasn't been available to do an episode for a while. But this was his submission, and honestly, apart from the fact that he really loves a game that's quite similar to this that we've covered on the show that we'll talk about, I'm not quite sure what the draw was. Steve Silver number 1 was published by, in some places it says WB Software, but it became a little clearer when I did find an ad in your computer. It's W and B, which surely is the last names of creators Colin, Webb, and Jim Bennett. Looks like it was out in 1983, selling for £7.50, exclusively, to the best of my knowledge, for the 48K Spectrum. Dudley, does that match up with what you found so far?
Yeah, I had to notice it being that for that time, that is very much a full price game. So that's worth bearing in mind. This is competing with the absolute best of the best at the time.
Right. And from my general assessment of the scene, this was also before you really get into that true budget space where you're seeing games released for £3, £2. So I find that a lot of these earlier titles before 1985 do tend to all look like those full price titles.
Yeah, pretty much before the likes of the Mastertronics and your Codemasters come along.
Right. So this game also stands out in that it's got among the most minimal background available. I only found one tape inlay. It was a very low res scan, very, very basic. There's not really anything in the way of gameplay information, and that was what you had to go on as well, right, Dudley?
Yeah, I had a scout around. I could not find any form of manual or instructions. There was one map online, and frankly, I think it is wrong. But it's quite a mind-bending game.
Is it the very zigzaggy one that's found on Solution Archive? Yes. I think we were both working off the same map. Yeah, this seems to be a somewhat lesser-loved title overall in the genre, but it does have a solution and a map up on CasaSolutionArchive.com. The tape inlay does tell us how many locations the game has. I believe it was 106. I've observed that's usually not a great sign for quality when you're talking about locations. It does boot up with the screen that I guess matches the world. This is a game about fueling your spaceship or getting onto your spaceship and fixing it. There's a wizard's lair. There's a lot going on. And I guess this that opening screen kind of represented something from the game world. I don't know. Did you kind of match up what we saw in the splash screen to where we ended up?
I mean, I think that's the most words that it's ever going to use across the whole game. It does explain the story there. From that point, other than the basic prospect of get to working ship, the game really doesn't give you a lot in terms of ongoing plot. It's extremely minimalist. And part of this, I guess, of course, is you're trying to fit 120 odd locations into a 48k game.
Yeah,
there's no multi-load or anything going on.
Right. And I do want to talk about the space that it takes up and why it takes up in a little bit. But yes, if you've played, say, Scott Adams Adventures or the Arctic Adventures, which we'll definitely bring up again, you'll recognize the format. Very, very basic text descriptions. Mostly, you are in a place. These are the items that are in the place. Again, the tape inlay doesn't really tell you how to interact with it, but it is a basic 2-word parser, except when it isn't, and I'm going to get into that as well. Nigel Hubbard, in that September 1983 issue of Your Computer, wrote, W.B. Sott's Adventure 1 is an exceptionally dull program in which Steve Silver has to find and repair his captured spacecraft. There's no detail to the locations. For example, I'm in a forest. Okay, but what kind of forest? I would like to know. Not a hint of humor enlivens this boring game. And, I mean, it's easy to see how they filled up the memory once you take a look. It is coded up in BASIC, and although there seems to be some sort of database-driven movement between areas, there's not really what we would call like a parser engine driving, this is how you display a description, this is how you display exits. All of those are hard-coded in memory. So at first I'm like, why is this even taking up more than 16K? Why wouldn't it fit in a 16K spectrum? But it is... it's all very hard-coded. Specialized commands are using just string matching. Did they type this? So that's pretty quickly how they filled it up.
And it's probably worth saying that was an ask, because the Spectrum launched as a 16K and a sort of premium 48K model initially, and we're in 1983 only a year in. So there would have been plenty of the user base then that had the 16K. That machine rapidly died out. I think it was discontinued in 85, but mostly because people weren't buying it because software didn't run on it.
Right. No, and that makes sense. And you would see that a lot of the Scott Adams titles, continued to be available for 16K games, or for 16K machines rather, and some of the other similar developers. I think Webb and Bennett just weren't efficient enough to make it work for the 16K. If you're interested in how the parser itself works, you have to take. You can't do any getting. Doesn't support. I think it's a four-letter parser, such as it is. So inventory, you need to type a fair bit of that out. It has the feel of a Scott Adams type game where if you give a command, it'll just say things like, I cannot do that yet, or I don't understand, and you're not sure. Inventory management was a bit of an issue, and I didn't ever see it tell me you're holding too much. I saw it say when my inventory got full, it would just say, I cannot do that yet when I tried to pick something up, which doesn't tell you that your inventory is full. What did you find?
Yeah, I have notes like that. It was astonishingly unhelpful. I see nothing special, or I can't do that yet is actually extremely unhelpful, because no, you can never do most of those things. The yet presumably is, and here's my theory, right? I think they rushed this out a bit. I think that the I can't do that yet is meant for the programmer who was supposed to add a few more things and either ran out of memory or time. It's the engine cannot do that yet, and we weren't really supposed to see that.
Interesting. Yeah, that could be. At some point they said, well, look, we've paid for the ad and people are going to start sending in their 750, and so now we have to be able to sell it. So yeah, when my inventory got full, I just ate the sandwich that I've been carrying around for a while, because I'm like, well, I haven't found anywhere else to use it, so I ate the sandwich so I could pick up the gun.
A tale as old as time.
Yeah. And I mentioned that some of the specialized commands they're very specifically pattern matched. So, for example, at one point you have to cross a ravine, and it does that thing. It's very common where it says like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And if you've played enough of these games, you know the answer is generally a 2-word response. With whatever. But you can't say. In this case, you're supposed to cross it with a board. You can't say with board or use board. You have to type use the board. And you go like, all right, well, he wants the article, fine. So then later, when you're trying to get through a locked trap door and you have to hit the bolt, and you say, oh, I better say with the hammer. No. You got to do with hammer there. So that was unfortunate and pretty unfair. The game does warn you, by the way, don't press the break key, which for me, not being the most Spectrum literate, I'm like, I don't even remember which one the break key is. And because I keep never finding a better Spectrum emulator for macOS, it's Zisaru UX, which unhelpfully constantly wants to put a pop-up GUI on the screen when you click. And the way you get rid of that is by hitting the escape key, which, by the way, is also what break is mapped to. So I can't tell you how many, not of this, I was very careful with this one. But on past gameplays, I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally broken out. And I'm like, I can't believe this. So what did you play on?
And obviously that warning, never press the break key, was the immediate giveaway to the Spectrum owner, because that was my first computer. It's a basic game then. I actually am old school as well, but I don't have that problem. It's a Windows-based emulator called Kegger.
Okay.
No, Kegger is the Sega emulator the same guy wrote. ZX Clive or something. But it's Steve Snake's emulator, and it's 20 years old.
Okay.
But also it's a Spectrum, and it works. It was perfectly serviceable for this. The problems were those of the game where you have to type slowly because early Spectrum game can't keep up with you. It does have backspace and such, so that's nice. I also have the note about use the board and all of this stuff. I also got thrown by use the board. I got thrown by, because I think that's the first time I catch it. You say do something and it says how. Mm-hmm. That's not I can't do that yet, try another command. That is a question to you.
Yeah.
And use the board is the answer. Use the board wouldn't actually work unless you've done the how.
Correct. And that is a convention of these 2-word parser games. You do see that a lot. Kind of Scott Adams, and I think Colossal Cave might have done this, but Scott Adams really did kind of establish that, if you need to do something like unlock door with what? With key. Like that was an understood rhythm. Although, usually you like to tip off players to that in your instructions, which apparently there weren't any of. So it's on point for the genre, but usually you help people out a little bit more than that somehow. Sometimes you'll do it as a little text tag, like they'll say type with whatever. But these guys did not do any of that.
And it's funny you should mention Colossal Cave, because I came along to Spectrum in 86, so I'm after some of these games, but I do remember Colossal Cave, and in fact that trilogy might just be the first adventure games that I played, obviously with my dad at age 6, but it's been that long since I played it, and actually I only tracked it down recently because the only memory I had was trilogy of Spectrum adventures that I'm pretty certain came in a blue box.
There were a few of those eventually, but
I have looked through a lot of Spectrum computing, Jason, but it was Colossal Cave.
I believe you. That was the 3-part adaptation by Level 9, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't taken that one on yet, but that is on the list. Now, we talked a little bit about the map. And this is a varied world in which you are exploring, you are gathering up treasures, you are trying to get to your spaceship and make good your escape. Yes, there is a map out there. I ran into a little bit of trouble navigating a couple of areas where we're expecting something to take us west, for example. I found I'm not good at mapping, but the layout to me seems pretty odd. Not so much in one-way pathing, but just like, how did this turn into an up? How did a down take me here? It's mappable. There's not like, obscure directions in a maze as such, but but it is big. I was very confused by the description that said, I am at a style, Style. I have not had a chance to look up my British English, but is that a place? Is that a thing?
I believe that that's a typo, and I stand to be corrected, of Stile.
Okay.
Which would be, if you were to Google it, you'd see, but essentially you're getting between two fields where there's a wooden fence. It's a board they put perpendicular, so you can stand on one side, step over the fence, stand on the other side, step to ground.
An arrangement of steps that allows people but not animals to climb over a fence or wall from
I'm
Oxford
pretty
Languages.
certain that's what they were going for there.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wasn't sure. But yeah, I'll buy that because yes, there are some sort of pastoral sequences.
Yeah.
There's also arcade sequences. So in the midst of this rather stripped down 2-word parser, give or take experience, there are at least 2 arcade sequences. One of which was more of a punishment. I think there was some sort of score reward, but the other quite mandatory. And just to kind of remind our listeners who aren't super familiar with the Spectrum architecture, like this is a machine that shipped as a small box that was a keyboard. Like you could get joystick adapters for it, but they weren't mandatory. They weren't inbuilt to the system like, say, a Commodore 64 or an Atari machine. So oftentimes you have, keyboard commands or key presses for your arcade games as a default, if not the default, and that's what these were. The first one being you have to throw basically just a Space Invaders turned on its side kind of thing. You move up and down. You press a button to fire. Pretty chill. It didn't seem like, apart from not letting them run into you, there was too much jeopardy to it. And apparently the walkthrough says you can skip it entirely. But I definitely checked it out. Did you play the animal game?
Okay. By mistake. Because I made basically, if you wander into one area that you probably shouldn't wander into, when you leave, the animals attack you, and there's as described by Jason, you throw rocks at animals to keep them away from you. It is, and I noticed just this, easiest arcade game ever. They move slowly towards you, you move up and down the screen. If you throw on the right row, you will hit them. So yeah, it's extremely easy, and I can confirm completely dodgeable. There is no reason to enter what is actually a dead-end field. There's no objects. You just do not have to go there. But, I'm playing the game, so I'm trying every direction from every direction.
Right. And that may be a first. Like, there are these games out there that have the little... Oh, no. We had the little arcade sequence in, I think, Crypt of Medea, I believe. So there's a little bit of that in some of these early adventures. They kind of start weaning themselves off of that in a year or two after this. But yeah, so the animal arcade sequence, that's one of them. But then you get to the end of the game, you've collected up the treasures you're going to collect, you get on your spaceship, it says, there's a loose wire. Okay, better tighten that wire. Mm-hmm. And then there's a mandatory arcade sequence. And now I'm playing in an emulator. It's emulating a straight up Spectrum 48K. I have a contemporary keyboard. I don't have a fancy keyboard. I've got a very old HP USB keyboard. I'm very happy with it. But my point is, it's a real keyboard. It's not a membrane. It's not chiclet. Mm-hmm. I had to play this little gamelet, I think 4 or 5 times before I successfully completed it. And I had snapshots to work with. I can't imagine the screaming that would have resulted if somebody played all the way to the end of this game, and then this stupid little, basically steer left, right to get through this little gap, get your spaceship through this little gap, to have your game end there, one try, just brutal.
And I do know the screams because it's an extremely simple game. You take off, you try to fly through a hole, which is at the top of the screen. I cannoned it straight into the ceiling, and at that point realized I hadn't save stated for a very long time. So I have played it once, and I have rage quit, which I feel is the authentic experience. I have looked up the final screen, and it is literally just well done, as you'd imagine for a game who describes everything in one line. Like, most of the location descriptions are things like you are at Devil's Point, and Devil's Point has nothing to do with the game. It is literally the middle point of a 3-room sequence to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
It is called that. It could be called Kevin. It has nothing to do with anything. And the game does a lot of that. And there's 120 locations, but there isn't. There's about 30.
Yeah. So I was snapshotting as I went along, if for nothing else, because I didn't trust myself to not break out of the program in an inconvenient spot. So I did play it a few times, and I was like, am I going to have to slow down this emulator to do it? I really hope not, because again, it was just doing straight up 100% speed Spectrum emulation. But like, if you don't know, because you don't, how would you know if you don't know what that the speed and the aim of that thing is going to be? That was really rough. This game, like I said at the beginning, it's very similar to Arctic's Planet of Death from episode 2, which was another game that Dave Hawkins championed. I'm finding maybe he's got a thing for being stranded on a planet and having to rebuild his ship. That might be something that really works for him. This game followed that one. It's not really breaking ground. The other one didn't. I've had some rough things to say about it, so I do want to point out some things that I did overall like. And one thing that I liked is, to Dudley's point, he's right. Like, it's a pretty empty world in a lot of ways, but at least you're not being punished for exploring it, in that there aren't really a lot of random dead-end deaths. There is the little thing with the animal game, but whatever. It was a low effort lift to get out of it. There's not a lot of random events or other BS that simultaneously say, here's a big world you have to get around. Also, we're going to make it really hard for you to do that. So if you're gonna create a world like that, great. Let us explore it. Similarly, the mapping, although capricious in how does this connect to this, there was at least some thematic connection to it. Okay, this is the wizard's restroom. This is the wizard's bedroom. Sure, fine. It was next to things that maybe didn't make sense for it to be next to. A lot of objects that I didn't find any use for. There's a lot of things that I ended up bypassing because of that. I think it's basically a 6-object carrying limit. Did you run into similar issues? Or, I definitely ended up having to stick to the walkthrough after a while, just because things like use the board were just, too tough for me to get past. But
I actually initially downloaded the walkthrough because I was defeated by the item picking up confusion.
Yeah, okay.
I eventually figured it out. I've written this maybe in the instructions, probably not, to be honest.
I don't think so.
So I certainly, for the second half, used the walkthrough. I don't think I've got a note that you have to type small axe rather than axe to pick up the axe, and then you don't use the small axe. So that was worth my time. Thank you.
Yeah, the word modifiers were odd, because like gold chest was all one word, but certain things were gold space, and I wasn't sure if there was a theme to that.
Not that I spotted. There are bonus points in the game, which is something we haven't mentioned, for bringing as much treasure onto the ship as possible, subject to that item limit.
Yes, there is a score, and you only get that score after you win. Like, you can't ask for it partway through, which is unusual. But yes, as you're trying to escape, you're also trying to bring the most valuable treasures with you, which again, you can't tell what they are until you complete the game with them. The walkthrough does break that down, but
it's obvious what is treasure. Like they are gold or sapphire or such, but which one is the valuable one is tricky. And I remember this because of my other note, and this gives an indication of the map to anyone listening. From the Sapphire store, which is genuinely the name of the place you pick up the sapphire, there is an exit down, which lands you in some bloke's back garden. And given that you were underground anyway, I had questions.
Yeah.
But that's pretty typical.
Yeah, other kind of storytelling tropes that they fell into, like a lot of games of this type, you end up somewhere strange and magical, but you end up then being asked to do dull things with common household objects. Like at one point, you find a lost city. Well, that's cool. What might be in this lost city? A bucket. Oh, okay, the only bucket in the land. Well, that's nice. Mechanically, I thought it was interesting that filling the bucket at the well didn't say now you have a bucket full of water. It just turned the bucket object into a water object, which is an interesting way of going about it. So if you played Planet of Death You probably got the point of escaping from a planet. Steve Silver, I'll give him credit. They tried to make him out to be a hero. It is a good, solid, heroic name. I didn't ask at the outset, had you encountered this game at all in any way before this?
No, I hadn't heard of this at all. So I was coming into actually both these games completely blind.
Yeah, and Webb and Bennett, I'm not sure if they went on to do anything independent of one another, but their kind of moment in the sun was a half dozen titles or so that it looks like they were self-publishing for Spectrum, and then they moved on to other things.
It's a fair number of hobbyist programmers were like that. You saw an opportunity as to monetize a hobby, as some people do. And then, the professionals start arriving a few years later, and either you join one of them, try and form one of them, or you give up and go back to your programming accountancy software day job.
So from me, not a strong recommend on Steve Silver, but if nothing else, Dave Hawkins, this one was for you. Dudley, any closing thoughts on this curious 106 location adventure?
Essentially, I can't hate it, and if you somehow figure out that map, it does hold together, but without any real reoccurring story or any real description of your locations and wasted locations, you kind of don't feel rewarded enough for playing through it, not engaged enough that I would actually recommend someone pick it up now.
All right, so for the diehards, that was The World That Is in Steve Silver Adventure number 1. And on now to our main course game, Gruds in Space from Sirius Software. This was a full-price release for Apple II, Commodore 64, Atari in 1983. So Sirius Software, Dudley, do you have any connection to this brand whatsoever?
Absolutely no. Were they Apple II only? By any chance?
They were Apple II primarily. So they were one of those labels that really hit it big coming out of the late 70s into the early 80s. I mean, that was a company that they were on fire. Mm-hmm. And they flamed out pretty quickly. But for a while, they were, and you see shades of it even in this game, which fundamentally, is a text graphic adventure. But you can see these are people who know how to get graphics out of the Apple II, which, is notoriously a machine that, like, if you throw the right bits in the right sequence, you can get it to do things, but it's not as engineered for graphics as, say, an Atari or a Commodore 64 was.
And you mentioning those is kind of the point. I think some know, but the Apple II was a non-entity in the UK. Right. Like, essentially does not exist. The C64 was popular, but not early on, even though it ultimately won. We were all on those spectrums. So games that are Apple II and C64, especially this early, which is 85, I want to say, for Gruds, it's unlikely to have been played by half as many Brits as Americans, say.
Yeah, no, this was 83, and that's important because there's going to be an overlap with another game that we've covered as well. But where this one, unlike how Steve Silver followed it, this one preceded a similar game. But yeah, Sirius founded 1980. I'm just reading this quick laugh of Moby Games. Founded 1980 by Jerry Jewell and Terry Bradley. Nasir Gabelli was one of their standout programmers because he was one of the first people who really figured out how to get compelling arcade action out of that hardware. But they were one of the victims of the collapse of the various segments of the market in 1984, being owed a lot of money and so forth. So they burned hot and fast and died, kind of crashed and burned at the end there. But in addition to a lot of action games, some of which may have found their way to UK ports, although again, they were largely catering to the North American market. They did also have a handful of text adventures, or in this case, text graphic adventures. So Gruds in Space, written by Chuck Somerville and Joseph Dudar. This is a game that I have just never had an excuse to play until now, but I've been aware of it forever because it was one of the games written up in the original Book of Adventure Games, which is a compendium of hints and solutions. So I've flipped past it many times, seen the exploits of Mr. Green and his counterfeiting machine, and I've been like, we should play this one of these days. So another title where, in this case, I was genuinely surprised by how minimal the instructions were, because Sirius they were a mainstream publisher. They had retail presence. They knew who they were up against in this space. I mean, like by 1983, Infocom is clicking along. They've got their, very big budget, packaging with, lots of feelies and lots of instruction and so forth. So when I found the archive on MoCAG, the computer game, adventure game museum, I was really expecting more than what I saw, which was fairly straightforward, minimal. This is how you play a text adventure. This is the types of commands that you can enter. And having no context for the game before you came in, what did you kind of expect to see when you first booted up the title?
Pretty much this. Although one thing I didn't quite realize the reason for at first is that it is very proud of its realization of the scenes graphically, and it should be. My actual first encounter with an Apple II is Sega's Mystery House. Sierra's Mystery House, Stephen. So that was quite innovative at the time for how it drew things, and this has just gone another level past on the same machine. It is much prettier than I was expecting, and the reason it always uses such minimal descriptions of its entire environment is because, well, there's a picture.
Right.
It's 1,000-wording you. My actual first impression of the game, though, is and bear in mind I'm coming straight off still Steve Silver. I played both these in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I went to the storeroom. I typed "get all." It worked. I was immediately in love with this game. Of course, it turns out I shouldn't have got all because this also has an inventory limit, but it worked.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to just read a little excerpt here from Soft Talk, November 1983. Talk about anti-heroes. In this high-res space adventure, the hero is a Han Solo-like captain who is perfectly willing to save the human race for the small fee of $1 million. To accomplish this feat and get the bucks, he must coax some Saturn miners out of their precious fuel and deliver it to the United Federation, the hope of mankind, who just happened to be out of gas in the middle of a battle. It goes on a bit. Now, that sounds pretty good, actually. I was a little dismayed that the game didn't set us up with a little bit more of that. But yes, we are, instead of repairing our spaceship, we are flying about, and we get to visit a number of different planets. It's one of the puzzles is just accumulating the coordinates that you need, and it's kind of a 2-stage format. First, you have to tell your warp engines where to go, and then you have to tell your teleporter, this fun teleport window where you're going to beam down to. Back to Sirius software lore, the titular Gruds, these green gremlin-y alien creatures, that was the Sirius software mascot. So you'll find mention to Gruds in other Sirius titles. So this was kind of, I think of just like a game that's like a Lemming Quest. It already meant something to that game playing audience. As Soft Talk goes on to say, somehow players must gain the Gruds' confidence, trick the Gruds, steal from the Gruds, buy their way through the game, be trigger happy, run errands, become mud pearl divers, all of the above, or none of the above. With all, it's the well-drawn animated Gruds that save the game. Perhaps someday the screen will be completed and the player will be submerged within the game's universe. So I was really intrigued to get a chance to try this out. And this was, we initially were going to play the Apple II original because I felt that was the way to go. And then you made an unfortunate discovery about the disk images that I had selected. So what did you play this on? And then we'll talk about the hiccup we found.
I actually did ultimately finish it on an Apple II with the alternative disk images. There is, of course, a C64 version that I was keeping in my back pocket if needed, but I actually managed to find, well, you gave me an alternative Apple II disk image that did work. But the problem I had is there is one point where you go to walk off the ship and it just locks.
Yeah, this was the 4 a.m. crack, and maybe there's a way to get Mr. 4 a.m.'s attention on this, because normally those archives that you find are like definitive disks to use. But you were playing on Applewin, correct?
I believe so, yes. I've had it a very long time. I doubt it was a very new version of Applewin, which might be relevant. It was the version already on my hard drive. But it was a point where you flip sides of disk, and this is a dual-sided disk game, which is why you can't play it just off archive.org like you might sometimes try.
Right. So yeah, that was the other thing, is that did we make you play something on the Apple II for the very first time? It sounds like you maybe had the emulator sitting around for
I
other
had the
reasons.
emulator. It's going to be a version of 2019. I did a retrospective once on the developer Distinctive Software Inc. You'll know them for Test Drive.
Yeah.
And they actually also made FIFA and Need for Speed later. But they started on the Apple II, so some of their early games I used that for. And indeed played the Sierra game previously mentioned on it as part of a Sierra history episode, but I would say I've not touched a lot of Apple II, no.
I am pleased to report that I also got to play it on Apple Win. There are lots of different Apple emulators out there, some of which actually do work on the Mac, but Apple Win, it is the best one for, I just need to do a thing. Mm-hmm. I need to maybe have joystick support, or maybe need to flip a disc. Can I please just get in and do this? And in the past, I've sometimes broken out my old Windows laptop, or I've compiled Wine to run Apple Win. I am so thrilled to report there is now a macOS fork of Apple Win called Mariani, and it's the Apple Win experience, more or less. I did run into a couple of quirks, but basically worked fine. So thank you, guy who ported Apple Win to macOS for me, so I could just have nice things and not get too trapped in some of the complex menus that some other emulators have. When we subjected founder Ben to an Apple adventure years ago, he ran into the backspace isn't where you expect it to be. I ran into this and I looked it up quickly, and they're like, use left arrow, dummy. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll use left arrow. Did you manage to defeat the backspace problem that would face a novice?
I'm pretty certain I just pressed backspace.
Okay, well, good. So then your emulator was helping you out.
Yeah, I think Apple Win's helping me out there. And I agree. I did want to play it on Apple II because on Commodore 64, it certainly wouldn't be as impressive for the machine.
Right.
It feels like you're supposed to play it on an Apple II, I would say.
I agree. And yeah, like this game has surprisingly colorful and detailed and animated backdrops. Again, given just all the effort that goes into having to grind graphics like that out of an Apple II and fit it all on two disc sides while having basically unique graphics for every location you visit. Not a ton of text, but a reasonable amount of text. So again, this is ultimately a fetch quest. You have to get the fuel over to the people who need it. Along the way, you're visiting Saturn, you're visiting Venus, you're visiting Titan. Pluto gets into the mix. We've talked a little bit about the graphics already. Just say like the fact that they're nicely animated. That teleport window and the very intense primary and secondary colors that you get in the Apple II palette. I'm going to try to capture that in a GIF or a little video that I'll put out with this post. Like it's something you got to see to really believe it. And things like the Commodore 64 palette would mute that a bit.
Don't make me make a Commodore 64 color joke.
which was worse in Europe than in the US, I do have to say.
Yes.
But even the sound effects, I didn't hate them. When you go down a ladder and you get a sound that sounds like you may be falling to your death, and then it's just fine. Maybe that's a little over dramatic. But I thought it was a decent level of detail. Did you actually use the view screen or the window to see the different?
Yeah, and that's an entirely optional thing. You can walk to your window of your ship, and you can look out the window, and you will see Earth or Titan or nothing if you've buggered off into deep space.
Yep.
And there is no critical path in the game reason to do that, but they have gone to the trouble. And in fact, on some of the planets, it's not just your teleport pad. There are volcanoes in the background or something that are doing at least some animation. Technically, I have no problem with it at all. It's very nice.
Yeah. And again, I think it really was that by now, these guys are really good at making the Apple II dance for them. So they don't mind spending a little time on it because they know what they're doing, and it's not costing them a terrible amount in terms of disk space, which again, dual sides of a floppy, you do have to zip back at one point. I can't remember. Do they give us a year that we're in? I mean, we have warp drive and we have teleportation. So it's not next week, but
I don't remember it specifying. Maybe you occasionally get sent a message which you view on the ship, and I don't know if those are dated, but I don't think it specifies a year. It's far enough into the future that you can walk on the surface of Saturn.
I was going to say there's quite a bit of terraforming that's gone on in a variety of different ways, because although an oxygen mask does play a role, you're not compelled to be in any sort of spacesuit or helmet or anything like that while visiting places. Yes, like Saturn, where you can walk around. Yes, well spotted, or Pluto or any of those other things. I'm looking at those transmissions. No, codename power play. Yeah, I felt that some things were reasonably well clued, but there were certain things that I was waiting to have pay off. Like they kept saying, codename power play. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna remember that, because at some point somebody's gonna challenge me for what's the codename of the mission that I'm on, and that never actually happened. I would say this was another game that maybe not quite as much as Steve Silver won, but reasonably forgiving of exploration. Like it didn't seem like my ship was limited by its own fuel. We have to get fuel to the battle fleet or whatever, but you can warp back and forth and you're not under super duper time pressure, right?
Yeah, there's no... You can zip between, and you spend a lot of the game zipping, I think, Venus to Saturn and back, and Venus to Saturn and back. Probably too much to be hugely fun, because every time you do it, you have to go to one computer and type 6 numbers, then go to another computer and type 6 numbers. Yeah. So it's a little bit tedious, but it doesn't stop you doing the exploring. And indeed, most of the time, you can wander around the planet like an idiot trying to figure out what's going on. And very rarely is that a problem. I fell down a hole once. I got trapped in a peat bog or something once. But generally, you should know danger is coming when you're doing that.
Yeah, there were a few places, and including right at the end, where you could just wander in, and in my case, the game didn't end, but neither did I see any way of progressing. But yes, to your point about the slightly fiddly navigation, like your spaceship is kind of big that you start on, and you can see that you start like on what I guess we would call the bridge that has its own navigation computer, and it's got a view screen, and there's a computer room which I couldn't figure out what to do in there. I think it was just for flavor, but there's a communications room and so forth, and then near the teleportation room there's the auxiliary navigation room, which is a different place that you can enter coordinates, and that had to be a game tester, the publisher, somebody saying, like, you are making people travel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens away just to enter another set of commands. Don't do that. And how about we just put another navigation computer in there? That had to be it, right?
And I did have a note that I specifically appreciated them doing that, because I kind of saw that coming. Most of the start of that game was me failing to use a computer, so it's deeply realistic until you meet the aliens.
Yes, who are fairly prevalent early in the game. They do kind of become less significant as you go along. You do keep running back to one boss man who has just to further drive home the level of terraforming, because it's not just that the aliens can breathe out there, or maybe you've been modified. No, he's got a butler, and the butler just steps outside on the surface of is that one Venus or Saturn that he's on?
That one is Saturn, I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah, so very thoroughly terraformed by that point. Yes.
Although that does bring up talking about the parser, because it's one of those that's forgiving until it isn't, and part of that is the way it illustrates itself with pictures and not text. For instance, to get into the boss man's house we talked, you do have to type knock door.
Yep.
And there is another puzzle where you do need a table leg from a cafeteria, and you have to know that because you have to break it off the table by typing break table or something. And these are not normal commands, and at no point is there particular clues to that. And that's where the slight trickiness comes in. Most of it is pretty sensible.
Yeah, no, strong agree on the table. That one was pretty rough. Because you're in a cafeteria, and there's a thing there that, sure, if you're if you're paying attention, you can see, this represents table, but it's not described. It's not clued as there's a rickety table nearby or anything like that. So we do get into, I would say even more so just because it happens more often because this is a more fleshed out game, but kind of like with Steve Silver 1, where you visited an exotic, lost city and there's a bucket. Gruds in Space definitely suffers from, well, you're going to need a lever. There's only one lever in the universe, and it's the leg of a table that you have to break off on the planet Saturn. Like that's tough logic. Similarly, there's only one rope in the known universe that you can use to solve certain rope problems. So yeah, the table and some things that we were meant to understand were trees that I didn't particularly understand were trees.
Okay.
Some of
Weirdly, those I got.
Okay. Yeah, there was just one or two where I was just like, is that a path that's sitting? Oh, okay, that's the base of a tree. Okay. Not all of them, but some of them. It's always interesting kind of looking at what are the cultural influences of a game from 1983. There's at one point where there's kind of a throwaway joke where you're in a swamp and there's a sign pointing to Kurtz because Apocalypse Now would have been out just a few years before. So that's what we're tipping off here. Yeah, and speaking of which, there was a lot of time like kind of spent setting up this river. So I was expecting, even if it was just to kill me, that like swimming in it or drinking from it or something like that was going to provoke a response, but didn't really get anything out of that.
And I think that's where I made my one cultural note that might get me into trouble. So I'm just going to read it verbatim and hope I get away with it, which is, I don't want to suggest this is a more obviously American game than some others, but I will say you do solve one problem by shooting a tree.
I think that is that's entirely reasonable. Yes. There's a bridge that's washed out, and the fix to that is, well, only one thing to do: shoot that tree. Yes, the gun gets used a fair bit, honestly. There was a gun in Steve Silver, which, as far as I could tell, was only used to shoot the sleeping wizard if you chose to do so. But I got away with not doing it. Apparently, there's a random event that he may make you sorry for that if you don't.
If you hang around in his bedroom, he eventually wakes up.
Yeah, but that did not happen to me. I took a screenshot at. There's a nasty looking Venusian here, and I'm like, well, actually, it looks pretty chill. So you have to keep shooting that guy. There's a bat and so forth. The sort of frenemy character of the Arler, you have to take a shot at him before you then are able to befriend him. Map wise, this game really, I think, displays that like we're running out of resources problem, because I don't know if you kind of picked up on it, or maybe it didn't bother you because you're ready to be done. But Saturn, there's a lot of areas, a lot of areas. There's a fair but somewhat tedious cave maze. Fair in that like there's not a lot of direction changes or dead ends that kill you or whatever. But there's a lot of them. And then Venus, there's some locations, but then there are places like Titan and Pluto and one of the final ships that you visit, which have basically no locations to them.
Yeah, Titan is the bit where you obviously notice that. So at some point in the game, and obviously as is normal on this podcast, we are spoiling the heck out of this. Right. At some point in the game, you do need a bomb, and it tells you to go to Titan to get it. There are 3 locations on Titan, one of which north, one of which where you come in, one of which west. You go north, you pick up a bomb. You go west, you pick up the detonator. You are done with Titan.
Yeah.
And I did notice it recycling with different colouring a couple of the path-based locations. I think one of the Titan ones actually appears on Saturn in different colours, as a path shape. And I guess there are only so many path shapes. But yeah, I kind of spotted that. I actually saw, and I don't know if you encountered this, how much did you mess around with the cave? Because I went to the cave way too early. I bought a flashlight because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. It is actually not.
It is not. No.
I walked into the cave and I appreciated it automatically turned the flashlight on.
Yeah.
But you can leave the cave by what is the same entrance but you've gone down twice and not gone up. And one location just outside the cave is different. It has a man who only appears later in the game, warning you of danger. And you can actually, he's not there when you first go in. You can actually return to the cave, retrace your steps, come out of, quotes, the other entrance that's in the same place, and he's disappeared again.
Interesting.
And that's just me early in the game. You're not supposed to have gone to the cave then. And I did because I saw a flashlight to buy and I had a coin, and I thought that was how I was going to progress. I actually softlocked myself by buying the flashlight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, the first coin that I got, I did give to the butler, so I didn't make it to the shop yet, but interesting.
It's worth trying, but that was my experience. And I don't know if it was a bug or sort of deliberate, but it's very strange to have someone waiting outside the cave. I thought I'd actually progressed the game. I had not. Its minimalism does work against it, actually. I have one thing I wrote down. There are 2 notes in the game that you pick up. 2, people have written things on a piece of paper for you, kind of notes. The inventory just refers to them as a note.
Yes.
You cannot differentiate them unless you read the one specifically in your hand. And there is a point late in the game where you hand over one of those notes, and I've taken the wrong one, which really confused me.
Yeah, it does the same thing with keys. There are 2 items that are called a key, and you get a little bit of a tip off that the game knows that they're different, because this game does the thing that a lot of these American-style text graphic adventures do, where when you put an item down, it has like a given set of coordinates that it's going to appear on the screen. So no matter where you put it down, room-wise, it's going to show up at the same X, Y. So it treats those 2 keys differently, but you have no way of disambiguating between them. So yeah, note was another one where it doesn't have trouble disambiguating, but maybe it would be nice if it did, was the interminable orb exploration. Or was it? Were they called spheres?
I called it the box puzzle, but they were called orbs in the game, I think. And this is the one thing I knew going in, because the one thing I'd read about it was an article on MoGamer by Peter Davidson, who is actually the manual writer for Evercade. Oh. And he played this a few years ago, and he called it the one actual puzzle in the game. And it's a maze where you put coloured orbs into coloured boxes to open doors, which get you other coloured orbs, with the eventual goal of getting the black orb. The trap it sets for you, and I suspect everyone, including me, falls for this at least once, is remember to pick the orb back up because you will need it later.
Yeah, so the way that this mechanism works, and it was an area where I thought the parser overall was pretty good. I didn't run into too many places where I wasn't able to do a thing that I thought I wanted to do. Necessity of shooting a tree notwithstanding, like if you want me to shoot a tree, then that's what we have to do. But rather than saying, insert the orb or unlock, the door with the orb or whatever, what you really are just doing is you're just dropping the orb. Like it took a synonym, but the synonym was drop. So you drop the orb, and it then puts it on the screen in the place. But what we're actually doing here is on dropping it. So if you don't remember to take it with you, then you've locked yourself on the other side. And about 2/3 of the way through that, I would say, I did have that happen to me, and my snapshot save was maybe 1/4 of the way along. So I did have a bit of a dispiriting. I'm gonna have to go back and mumble grumble, go back and do that.
I did remember in this game, having just played the other one, to snapshot a lot. Yeah. It's actually quite easy once you know to pick up the balls. So long as you don't make mistakes, it's quite easy to get everywhere. You just constantly put your ball in all the holes. Okay, that's off color,
as you say.
But it's relatively easy in that respect. It doesn't wall you off. You just keep trying balls and doors until you eventually find the one you were looking for in the first place, which is actually ultimately, if I remember rightly, how you get the fuel.
Yes, the black orb being the goal there. This that puzzle, which is this alien ship near Venus, that was one of the places with the most obvious red herring puzzle, in that there's that... were you able to get anything to happen in the room with the blue and white door square? because I was like, oh, okay, that means I'll have to drop the blue and the white orb, and no, and neither the Solution Archive nor Book of Adventure Games, say anything about it or show anything off of it on the map. So I think it is just a door you can't open. But so if there was something to do with it, I couldn't figure it out.
Although that is a problem I did have in this game. Its use of very pretty pictures meant that I didn't always read the top right of the screen where it tells you. And so I constantly missed south exits because they generally aren't particularly well illustrated in the picture. And I forgot to read there is a south exit. So I actually got stuck on the ship at the very start of the game for 5 minutes before feeling like, well, a huge idiot.
Interesting. Yeah, no, this game has the... I guess a status bar style that was pretty typical to some of these text graphic adventures, right? Where the room location is upper left and visible exits are to the upper right. And yes, it does try to take a pretty consistent, as though you are facing north view on things, which yes helps for consistency. But yes, to your point, means that you do have to. Interesting, you have to pay attention to that.
And I think it's one of those times where I'm suffering for not having played many of these specific types of games since my Spectrum games. Because if I play another 2 of these games, I'm not going to make any of these mistakes. These are, you're coming to it essentially blind mistakes. Did you try ignoring the... when you first get the fuel, it gives you a distress signal from someone. Did you try ignoring that and just doing the fuel delivery you were paid for?
The distress signal was... Where did that lead us?
It leads you to a ship in orbit of Pluto rather than... I forget if it's a distress signal, but there's a ship in orbit of Pluto you've been warned about. And I ignored it, just went down to the surface of Pluto and delivered the fuel.
No, I did not. What happens?
They blow up your ship while you're on Pluto. And so the game ends because you are now stuck on Pluto. Except, of course, and this is why I wanted to bring up, you're not, because you've just delivered fuel to some very kind allies of yours. Why don't you just walk 1 step west and thumb a lift?
Yes.
You've got £1 million you can bribe them with.
Right. And they owe you one, seemingly.
And indeed, they in fact owe you one. But yeah, I quite liked that. I noticed you made the other possible mistake here with the bomb and the ship, though.
Well, yes, because I did poke around in memory, and I saw a lot of Pluto blows up, Venus blows up. I'm like, how do we get that to happen? Well, there's this bomb and this remote control, which, as Dudley mentioned, are conveniently near, but not in the same room on Titan. But there's not much exploration to do. So I'm like, okay, well, I presume this just happens when you just put the bomb somewhere and press the remote control, and indeed it does. So you get a nice big comic book kaboom when you do that. But no, I did go to the to that rogue ship, but that was where, which yes, that was what you are meant to do with the bomb. But that was a place where I discovered a weird soft lock, and I'm not sure if this was meant to go differently, or if I just didn't find the right command or wait long enough. But yeah, that ship is a 2-room affair. There's the cargo hold that you beam over to, and then there's a room with guards. And I first went over to the room with the guards, and it was like, well, the guard sees you, and there's only one exit to the east. And they said, well, you can't go that way. So I could neither get free of the guards, nor was the game ending. Like, I was just stuck there. So I'm like, well, all right, I'll back up a snapshot and just drop the bomb and do what it looks like I'm supposed to do, which was what I was supposed to do. But yeah, it was odd that that one didn't have more of a resolution.
I did have the guards eat me, so I wonder if you got very unlucky there.
Interesting.
Because of course I wanted in there first. There was another room to explore, so I explored it.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it just, which honestly feels like what was intended.
Yeah,
but
I'm
not sure why it did not happen to me.
And if you're on there to clandestinely blow up a ship, why would you wander onto the bridge if you weren't playing a video game and wanted to know what was that way?
You want to find the right place to put it so they don't find it first. Video game logic could take you in a lot of different places.
What you should do is walk onto the bridge and say, DHL here, package for you, then just run.
So we talked about the blue and white door red herring. The other thing that really struck me was that there were quite a few red herring items in the game that seemingly did nothing, including like everything that's on the ship with you at the outset. None of which was I didn't find a use for any of that. Did you?
I don't think I did, and this is why I said I shouldn't have got all, because I just immediately filled my inventory with blue module and red module, which, when I got to the ship with the orbs, I thought, should I have brought the blue and the red module?
Right.
But no, they're not used anywhere. So I don't know if maybe a puzzle was cut, possibly early on, and they just didn't remove the items, or maybe they were just in there to slightly screw with you in the first 5 minutes of the game to make you spend the next 2 or 3 hours plus wondering if you should be doing something. But it's pretty mean in a game with a limited inventory, because that would basically be your inventory. And I ended up just... there's the teleport, there's the nav computer, and then there's a sort of empty room with the ladder. And I just used that empty room with the ladder as my storeroom. There were like 50 objects in there sometimes, because I would just walk there, drop all, and whenever I went down to a planet, decide what the 6 things I might actually need were.
Yeah, so those starting items, definitely an inventory puzzle. And then, yes, there's a very limited supply of money in the universe until you get your $1 million, at which point the game is over. So there's the Gruds store, where there's a very limited number of things that you can actually buy, and you don't truly know what you need. The other objects seem plausible, things you might want, especially because we are in a video game world where there's only one example of those in the universe, but you just kind of have to know. So those were tough.
The world's only flashlight, 1 coin, and then 2 screens away, someone just gives you a flashlight.
Right. Yep. So Gruds in Space, this one, right down to the surprisingly good and lengthy theme tune that they play at the end when you save the Federation and get your $1 million check. I thought it was overall quite entertaining. It does have some quirks, does have that sort of narrowing of scope as you get towards the end, which you don't love to see. But it seems like your first tour through one of these American Apple II style adventures. What did you think?
I would absolutely agree. It doesn't help that the weakest part of the entire game is definitely that last 10 minutes. The Titan bomb collection we described is basically the start of the end game. And then you go to one ship, drop a bomb, get off it. Go to another ship, hand them some fuel, get off it. They give you the coordinates to Earth, and you literally teleport into your boss's office where he says, "Here's some money. We thank you for playing the game."
Yeah.
And that's weak, but a lot of the rest of it is very, very good. I would have liked more clues and description, even with the pictures of stuff like the table leg, occasionally it invents a single-use parser word like revive is used once. You're supposed to guess that. But broadly, this was a heck of a lot more enjoyable, and this is one where us ripping the heart out of it for your enjoyment in audio aside, this is worth someone now I would actually send to go back and look as an example of old adventures, whereas I would not send them to our Spectrum game on that basis. I think they'd come away annoyed. Here they might go, that's quite nice.
Yeah, and I'd mentioned that both of these games had strong echoes to titles that we've covered on the Retro Adventures before. In this case, Gruds in Space is pretty similar to the Tracer Sanction, which was one of the earliest Interplay games, and we played that through all the way back in episode 4. In this case, Gruds in Space came first, and you can kind of see, because Tracer Sanction was another kind of you're gallivanting around the solar system. You're in that case it was resource constrained in that you had to buying and marshaling your fuel was a big part of it, but also they streamlined there's only one navigational control. It's not so fiddly. There's only one thing that you really have to unlock in terms of not knowing how to get there. So you can see where they kind of streamlined that, but it had the same sort of feel of like, oh, okay, I'm on this moon of Jupiter and it has like one shopping mall. Okay, I'm going over to to Earth and it has again just the boss's office and a couple of other things. Okay, you kind of feel the scope there a little bit, but as a slightly earlier example of this, the sort of solar system hopping and heroic deeds, Gruds in Space worth taking a look at. If you do choose to play the 64 or maybe the Atari version, I would be interested to hear if you out there had a different experience with it. But with that, I thank you very much, Dudley, for taking up the mantle on this. You stepped up. I threw it out to a bunch of YouTube type hosts on Discord, and you were the one who said, "Sure, I'll come on and do the show." So appreciate you putting in the time with us. Do you have any projects coming up, or maybe some of your kind of perennial? This is a great example of what Yesterzine does that you want to point people to.
I guess if I'm pointing people to anything, the channel is called Yesterzine on YouTube, and you cannot find anything else with that name. I've somehow managed that on 2026 internet. There are two from this year that if you're going to start with anything, start with that. One claims the ST won the 16-bit wars, and the other talks about the Batman pack, which is, of course, why the ST didn't win the 16-bit wars. And as a pair, those are a pretty good introduction to what I'm at least trying to do.
All right, we will link to those in the show notes. Encourage you to keep following Yesterzine and encourage you to continue adventuring with us on the Retro Adventurers. Thank you again, Dudley.
Thank you.
You have been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was edited by Nick Moffat and produced by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. And keep the conversation going on Discord, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins.